Welcome to Happy Hour. Over the next few episodes, we are going to be talking about the different types of spirits available to us. Also, within that, the different brands of the different types of spirits, and which of those brands that one might want to use in a particular type of drink, pursuant to its characteristics, or at least my opinion of its characteristics, which you can take with a grain of salt if you want. Right? So we have vodka, rum, whiskey, tequila, gin. Those are the big ones. And then there's liqueurs, which you can talk about later, and I'm happy to go over those with you. But like, why would I use a certain type of gin over another in a certain type of drink? Why would I use a certain type of whiskey or whatever? Rum, I'm not going to go over right now. Vodka, I can go over really quickly before we start the main program here. The better job the company does distilling the vodka, the less it tastes like anything. Vodka is meant to be pure. It is meant to be, in a way, flavorless, kind of invisible. So, you know, the cheaper the vodka, the more you get. If you get something like a Russian Standard Gold, for instance, it's actually quite creamy and smooth and pleasant because it's been so rounded by the repeated distillation process. But that's not going to have as much personality as something like a rum. Rum is on the sweeter side of things, not my forte, no shade to rum or for people who like it. It's just not, it's not something I know the most about. Rum is also from sugar, distilled from cane sugar. But that leaves us with whiskey and its different types, tequila and its different types, and then gin. Now all three of these spirits have really big flavors associated with them. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. Fair enough. We're going to start with, we'll start with one that's close to my heart, whiskey. Bourbon whiskey, made in the American South. If it's from Kentucky, it can be bourbon. If it's from Tennessee, it has to be sour mash. And if you want to know why, go ask some cantankerous southern neighbors and they'll tell you why. But it's more or less just like a unnecessary border dispute. There are some great whiskeys out of both of those states. I would say the American South is the best by a long shot at bourbon, though there are other regions in the U.S. who take a stab at making it. And I wish them continued success in their process of aging and refining their mash recipe and continuing to make delicious whiskey. That said, the American South has a head start on all of them as far as American whiskeys are concerned. So, with bourbon, what are the different types of bourbon? Well, there are many different brands, obviously. We've got bourbons. When I say bourbon, I'm going to include sour mash, so don't yell at the screen or anything when I say, like when I bring up Jack Daniel's, which is a sour mash, as opposed to Jim Beam, which is a bourbon, actual and proper. Jack Daniel's is, I don't know, mainly the people drink that with Coca-Cola. It's one of your more popular brands, as is Jim Beam, but there are other brands like that I would use even perhaps over Jim Beam, which are a similar price point. Four Roses, for instance. Four Roses actually has a few different levels. Four Roses is a nice rounder but not too sweet bourbon. They also have a small batch, which is like an even fancier brand under the Four Roses umbrella of brands, and then they have a single barrel, which is something that they've paid great attention to and is a great sipping whiskey. But if you're going to just mix like a whiskey and Coke, whiskey and ginger, something like that, you're probably going to be fine here. Now, of course, you can use a very expensive bourbon if you want for that, but it'd almost be kind of superfluous, wouldn't it? There's a certain point where you obviously want to use the best of ingredients, and there is a line with your spirits that once you get over that line, it's all kind of gravy. So like when you're mixing, there's a certain point where if you were to use a certain type of, like I just mentioned, the Four Roses brands, right? If you use their single barrel in, like a mixed drink or a sour, it would be kind of like putting ketchup on a steak. You know, yeah, you can do it, but hamburger is fine for that. In fact, it's great. Might even be preferable. There's so many flavors going on in a considered glass or a bottle of whiskey, rather, that you kind of just want to taste those on their own. But if you are going to make a drink like an old fashioned or a Sazerac, well, Sazerac's rye, so we'll save that for a minute. Pretend I didn't say that. But an old fashioned, you would want to use something, maybe if you like a sweeter whiskey, then you would want to use something like a Jim Beam or a Maker's Mark is a nice sweet whiskey. A little sweeter for my taste. But if I were to make an old fashioned, or a Manhattan, I would use something like Elijah Craig, which has a bit of a sharper flavor to it. It's just more crisp. And how do they achieve this? Well, it depends on what they're using in their mash bill, basically. Corn is going to make generally a sweeter whiskey, and then how long it's allowed to ferment, and then the distillation process will lend itself to variously more or less caramel notes. So that would be my. So if you're making a sour whiskey sour, I would use something that has a bit more of a robust flavor, for instance. And if you're looking to combat the sweetness of like a sour drink, then use something like an Elijah Craig that has more of a sharp note to it. Or if you like something really sweet, Jameson Irish whiskey. I mean, it's from over the pond, but that's a sweet whiskey with ginger ale. It's a really sweet drink. And if you like sweet drinks, like, load it up. You know, no shade. But you consider your whiskeys like you would if you were cooking. You know, more salt, less salt. Something's like acidic. You balance it with something that's a little sweet. Bartending is just like cooking. So if you ever hear me talking about why I would use it in a certain drink, it's because I'm considering it based upon the taste of the bourbon or the whiskey. And what I would suggest is that you do the same. And if you have any questions about because it's not necessarily feasible for everyone to just throw down $40 or $50 on a bottle. But if you read about it, like all these whiskeys that I mentioned here, and most in general, will have great websites with like a ton of information. In fact, they're more than happy to tell you about how their whiskey came to be, what was used in the process of the distillation process, how it was aged, how long it was aged. Generally, like a longer aging process is going to mean more money, right? And that's because people had to take care of it. A human being had to walk around with probably like a Rottweiler and a flashlight and make sure everything was okay while you were asleep. So all these different qualities that you can add on to your whiskey are great, and you can taste them. But also there's a point where I think when you're making a mixed beverage, we'll say, right, you kind of want to find that in between, call and top shelf. There's this like really ever-growing wide band of really good whiskeys that you can buy that are great for both sipping and for making a drink. So if you're into a sipping whiskey, that has like a not as sweet a flavor, it's a little more sharp. Like I said earlier, I choose Elijah Craig is a great sipping whiskey for me. But then also when I put it in a cocktail, I feel like I have a little more control over the overall sweetness of the cocktail, and it doesn't spiral out of control than if I were to use Maker's Mark, which to me is a sweeter tasting whiskey. Again, no shade, but it just tastes sweeter. But if you like a sweeter Manhattan, go for it. If you're making an old fashioned, that already has sugar in it, so you might not want to use something that's on the sweeter side. So I would either suggest one of two things. Have a party with friends and have a bunch of friends over and have everyone bring a distinct bottle of bourbon, and throughout the evening get little cups or little glasses and try little bits of each of the whiskeys. That's a great way to learn what whiskeys taste like, and also a really fun time and a fun hang with your buds, right? Or you can go to restaurants that you like that have a great selection, and oftentimes they'll offer flights, and you can check that out through that process. Or like I said, again, you know, a slower result or yield would be going and buying a bottle, you know, here and there one at a time until you find kind of your lane in bourbon, you know, buying them from the store, which is a great way to go too. If you enjoy the bourbon as a drink at the end of the day at home, it's a nice drink. So that's what I get to say about bourbon. It's not wizardry. I'm not a scientist. Hell, I'm hardly even a bartender. But I can tell you what I know, or what I think I know, which may or may not be true. This has been Happy Hour, brought to you by Maine Spirits. You can learn more about this and many other spirits at mainspirits.com. You can download their app for your smartphone. That's a smart move. Why? What to buy, where to buy it, and what to do once you get it. You can also follow them on Instagram at main_spirits. But no matter what you do, please drink deliciously and responsibly. And we'll see you next time.